climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's here, it's real, and in 2025, its impact on migration has become impossible to ignore. Rising sea levels, devastating floods, heat waves, and droughts are not just environmental problems. They are forcing millions of people to move. In today's video, we'll explore how climate change is reshaping the world map of migration, who is most affected, and what this means for the future of our planet. Climate migration refers to the movement of people who are forced to leave their homes due to sudden or progressive environmental changes. Unlike traditional migration driven by jobs or education, climate migration is about survival. People leave when their land no longer produces food, when their houses are washed away, or when unbearable heat makes life impossible. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, estimates that by 2050, over 200 million people may be displaced because of climate change. In 2025, we are already witnessing the acceleration of this trend. From villages disappearing under rising seas to families fleeing wildfires, the stories are becoming global headlines. But here's the challenge. Most international laws still don't recognize climate refugees. These people are often trapped between borders and legal systems that don't know how to handle them. And that's where the human tragedy deepens. Small island nations like the Maldives, Tuvalu, and Kiribati are on the front lines of climate migration. In 2025, sea levels have risen faster than many predicted, swallowing coastlines and contaminating drinking water. Families who have lived on these islands for generations now face the reality of permanent displacement. But it's not just islands. Coastal megacities such as Dhaka, Karachi, Lagos, and Miami face frequent flooding. Millions of people are being pushed inward, creating internal migration crises. Imagine millions leaving their homes and crowding into already overpopulated cities. This doesn't just stress housing and infrastructure, it reshapes politics, economies, and even culture. For many people, migration is not a choice but the only way to survive. Governments are beginning to plan relocation programs, but the emotional cost of losing one's homeland cannot be measured in statistics alone. Water scarcity is another powerful driver of migration. In 2025, parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia are experiencing historic droughts. Farmers can no longer rely on rainfall, rivers are drying, and crops are failing. Take the Horn of Africa. Millions are moving toward urban centers and refugee camps as farmland becomes dust. In South Asia, Pakistan and India are witnessing internal migrations from rural drought-hit areas toward big cities like Karachi, Lahore, and Delhi. But drought doesn't just affect food. It creates conflict. Communities fight over scarce water sources, and in some regions, migration is driven not only by climate but also by violence triggered by climate stress. The chain reaction is devastating. Drought leads to hunger, hunger leads to unrest, and unrest leads to migration. As we move deeper into 2025, food insecurity linked to climate change is becoming a defining factor in why people move. Another alarming development in 2025 is the rise of deadly heat waves. Cities across the Middle East, South Asia, and even parts of the United States are experiencing temperatures above the threshold for human survival. For outdoor workers, construction laborers, farmers, delivery drivers, this is life-threatening. Many families are leaving regions where work is no longer possible under extreme heat. Wealthier households can afford air conditioning, but the poor face impossible choices: stay and risk their lives or migrate. In some places, governments are trying to redesign cities with heat-resistant infrastructure, but the pace of climate change is faster than the solutions. The result: a silent but steady wave of climate migrants leaving overheated regions behind. Beyond slow-moving disasters like drought or sea level rise, sudden extreme weather is also forcing people to move. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and cyclones are now more frequent and more destructive. In 2025, we've seen massive floods in South Asia, catastrophic wildfires in North America and Australia, and powerful hurricanes striking the Caribbean. Each disaster displaces hundreds of thousands of people overnight. The tragic reality is that many of these people never return. Their homes are destroyed, insurance is unavailable or unaffordable, and rebuilding seems impossible. Instead, they relocate permanently, becoming internal or international migrants. This constant cycle of destruction and displacement creates a new type of migration, temporary at first, but often permanent. Governments and aid agencies are overwhelmed by the scale, and communities receiving migrants are struggling with the sudden population surges. One of the biggest issues with climate migration in 2025 is the lack of legal recognition. The 1951 Refugee Convention does not include climate refugees. People fleeing floods or drought cannot apply for asylum on those grounds. This creates a global justice problem. Countries contributing the least to carbon emissions, like small island states or poor African nations, are the ones most affected. Meanwhile, wealthier countries debate whether they should take in climate migrants at all. Some progress is happening. The United Nations has started dialogues on recognizing climate migration, and regional agreements are being tested. For example, New Zealand and Australia are considering special visas for Pacific Islanders displaced by rising seas. But overall, global cooperation is too slow. Without legal pathways, many climate migrants are forced into irregular routes, risking exploitation and trafficking. Unless urgent reforms are made, the human cost of climate migration will keep growing. Climate-driven migration reshapes economies. On one hand, receiving countries gain workers, which can fill labor shortages. On the other, sudden population influxes put pressure on jobs, housing, and healthcare. In 2025, Europe is witnessing this firsthand. Southern Europe faces heatwaves and crop failures, pushing farmers north, while at the same time receiving climate migrants from Africa. Similarly, the United States faces migration from Central America, where drought and hurricanes have made life impossible for many families. The social impacts are equally powerful. Communities that receive climate migrants often face tensions over resources and cultural differences. Yet, migrants also bring skills, traditions, and resilience. They contribute to economies through labor and remittances sent back home. The challenge is balance: how to integrate migrants humanely while managing the pressure on local infrastructure. If handled poorly, climate migration can fuel nationalism and xenophobia. If handled wisely, it can be an opportunity for shared growth. So, what does the future hold? In 2025, scientists warn that climate migration will not slow down, it will intensify. By 2030, millions more will be on the move. The question is whether the world will prepare or continue reacting to each crisis after it happens. Some possible solutions include recognizing climate refugees in international law, investing in climate adaptation to help people stay in their homes longer, creating safe migration pathways so people aren't forced into dangerous routes, building climate-resilient cities that can host new populations without collapsing. But solutions require global cooperation, and in a world divided by politics, that is easier said than done. The truth is that climate migration is not about if, but when and how. Every country will be affected, either as a sender, a receiver, or both. And how we respond now will define the human story of the next century. Climate change is the defining crisis of our time, and migration is its human face. From sinking islands to burning forests, from drought-stricken villages to flooded cities, millions are being forced to move. In 2025, climate migration is no longer a warning, it's our reality. Governments, communities, and individuals must recognize that this challenge is global and shared. Borders may divide nations, but the atmosphere connects us all. The choices we make today, whether to protect, support, and adapt, will decide whether climate migration becomes a humanitarian disaster or a story of resilience and cooperation. This is not just about those moving today. It's about the future of all of us on a warming planet.